Kaelin stood motionless as the archon's crystalline blade hovered inches from her throat, shielding the bleeding man she was supposed to despise. Elias coughed, a wet, rattling sound of broken ribs and tearing grit, yet her hand didn't waver. If you want to witness how a sentence of shame becomes a legend of defiance, you should subscribe and stay for the unfolding of a galactic shift. Now, let us look back at how two worlds began to collide. 3 weeks earlier, the recycled air of the Aegis Prime docks had tasted like burnt copper and old desperation. High Exarch Kaelin had stepped off her prismatic shard ship, her 7 feet of glowing blue pride meeting 6 feet of Terran grit as Commander Elias Thorne waited in the dust. To her father, this union was a death sentence. To Kaelin, it was the first time she learned what it meant to live. The Archon Valerius had intended the marriage contract to be a public flaying of her status, to be bound to a Terrena species that spent its short life digging in dirt and clinging to failing colonies, was the ultimate hegemony insult. Elias Thorne did not look like an insult, however. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to rest. His uniform was frayed at the cuffs, and his eyes held the weary weight of someone who spent every waking hour bartering for his people's safety against the Void Reavers. Their initial greeting was a study in coldness. Kaelin kept her chin high, her bioluminescence dimmed to a muted, aristocratic violet, while Elias merely nodded, his hands stained with the grease of a colonial harvester. "I see the shard ship brought the hegemony's finest," Elias said, his voice a low rasp. "I hope you're prepared for the fact that we don't have enough power for your light sculptures, Exarch." "I am here to fulfill a contract, Commander," Kaelin replied, her translator clicking with precise alien formality. "I require nothing from your primitive settlement but a room that seals." He had led her through the rugged colony, a labyrinth of corrugated metal and repurposed freighter hulls. It was a world of scrap, yet Elias walked through it with a quiet authority that made Kaelin's sensory fins twitch in confusion. He stopped at a small communal hab unit and pointed to a stack of salvaged items waiting to be sorted. On top sat a tattered, leather-bound book of Terrene philosophy, its spine cracked and its pages yellowed by age. Kaelin stared at it, her internal processors struggling to categorize why an animal species would preserve abstract thoughts on dead wood. As the suns of Aegis Prime began to set, casting long, orange shadows over the dusty plains, the silence between the High Exarch and the Commander grew heavy with the things they were both too proud to say. This journey is just beginning, and if you're curious to see how empathy becomes the sharpest blade, subscribe to see the rest of their story. The first night in the colony was an assault on Kaelin's senses. The hum of the atmospheric processors was uneven, a staggering rhythm compared to the seamless song of the shard ship. She found herself watching Elias from the doorway of his office. He wasn't reviewing tactical data or luxury manifests. He was manually repairing a thermal regulator for the colony's nursery. In the weeks that followed, the rhythm of the colony began to sink into Kaelin's skin. She watched Elias lead by service, not by decree, sharing his meager rations with families whose homes had been scorched by Reaver scouts. He was a commander of dirt and scrap, yet he stood taller than any king she had ever known. One afternoon she found him in the lower levels, hands trembling from exhaustion as he tried to stabilize the power grid. Without a word, she reached out, her glowing blue palm resting against his sweat-slicked neck, to pulse stabilizing energy into his system. The shock of the contact, the raw physical heat of him, made her processors stutter. "They call us weak because we care," Elias murmured, leaning into her touch just for a second. "They will learn that care's the sharpest blade we carry." The realization that the hegemony was stagnant, fed by coldness while this man survived on fire, changed everything. She began to spend her hours in the basement levels, not hiding in shame, but studying that tattered, leather-bound book of Terrene philosophy. It spoke of hope as a tactical advantage, a concept her people had discarded millennia ago. If you've ever wondered if a single choice can rewrite the stars, subscribe to join us for more tales of the unexpected. The peace broke when the Archon's fleet descended, not to protect the colony from the Reavers, but to scrub the stain of Kalen's union from the stars. Valerius himself stepped onto the red dust, his crystalline blade drawn to execute the commander and reclaim the Exarch. And now, in the shadow of the shard ship, the blade hovered. Kalen did not move. She felt the warmth of Elias's blood on her robes, but she also felt the steady, defiant beat of his heart against her back. The Archon's eyes widened, unable to comprehend why a High Esarch would offer her life for a creature of the dirt. The blade descended, but Kalen didn't flinch. She caught the crystalline edge with her bare hand, her bioluminescence flaring into a blinding supernova white that cracked the Archon's weapon. In that moment, the Shame Union died, replaced by a sovereign alliance. The hegemony guards hesitated, seeing not a disgraced exile, but a leader revitalized by a primitive species optimism. Valerius retreated, his authority shattered by the simple sight of a goddess protecting a man. Months later, Kalen stood on the observation deck as the colony's first true hospital opened. The dust of age's prime still clung to her boots, but she no longer sought the sterile halls of her home. In her hand she held the tattered, leather-bound book of Terrene philosophy, its cover now reinforced with prismatic glass. It was no longer an artifact of animal intelligence. It was a blueprint for a new empire. She placed the book on the central pedestal, a gift for the father who had sent her here to die, knowing that one day he would read it and finally understand the depth of the Terrene soul. Elias walked up beside her, his hand briefly brushing hers in the quiet dark. What happens when the story ends and the work begins? Subscribe to see what we build tomorrow.